on and have a conversation with me, because that's what this whole session is about. It's about conversations that shift into the direction of change. So we'll give a second for everybody to come in masked up. Very, very good. In the office. Good to see you, Samantha.
Very much good to see you again.
Nice to be in the office.
Yeah.
Did it, yes.
We'll just give it a second longer, see if others are going to come in. And then I have to remind myself of what we set the session topic as, because I have a tendency to go off topic. Okay, great. So yes, the settings in Zoom, by the looks of it, are defaulted to turn people's cameras off. I'll give you the option to turn your camera on or off. We would really encourage you to have it on so we can see each other, but understand if you don't want to. At the very least, we would love you to join the conversation. I'm incredibly casual and relaxed. I don't like formalities, so please feel free to talk over the top of each other, talk over the top of me, be rude. This is a safe space for you to do those kinds of things, because I'm probably going to do it anyway. So join me in that. So we're going to explore some of the elements that are in the book that we're giving away, that you'll hear more about a bit later on, Designed to Change. This is a follow-up book that we recently wrote, and it's the companion to the Event Design Handbook. If anybody's explored the event canvas, it's our design methodology that we use to create events with more intention, purpose, and measurable outcomes. And what we recognized, to give you some backstory on this, is 2015, the Event Design Handbook came out, and we started working with practitioners all over the world to design events. And we kept coming up against the same roadblocks in creating change in events. And a lot of that was based around the conversations that we have with event owners. So the executives, the CEOs, the CMOs, the people who maybe aren't working on the events or in the events specifically, but are responsible for them. And they're the ones telling you yes, no, or maybe. And maybes are the worst. We all know that. And so we started exploring with a group of long-standing practitioners. How do we navigate these kinds of conversations? What is the role of design in creating events? And how do we make sure that organizations that we support, the executives, the leadership within those organizations, allocate enough time, team, and space to design more impactful events? And the book starts with an opening question. I want to throw this to the audience to jump in, and we'll make it a free-for-all. We'll do popcorn. You've all got your mics muted at the moment. The rules of popcorn are, I'm going to leave a painful pause at the end of the question, and you just unmute yourself and just start talking. And it will be awkward and uncomfortable, but that's okay, because that's what this is about, being a little bit awkward and a little bit uncomfortable, because that's how we find innovation. So the opening question to the book, I think it's a pretty powerful one, and we'll see how we go addressing that. It is, a good conversation can shift the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance? Let's popcorn it. I asked the question to the group. A good conversation can shift the direction of change forever. Would you leave it to chance?
I leave very little to chance, but I asana things for a living and always have 6 contingency plans, because this isn't my first rodeo. And I think that events are about conversations and connections to each other, to content, to new ideas. And I think that those are far too precious to leave to chance. Yeah. And they're also far too precious to bear access to in any way. So I think it's really important to be thinking as inclusively as possible.
Thank you.
I agree with that. And I think part of the event experience is really designing what that experience and conversation is. So even if you provide kind of icebreakers to draft and lead the people to the right conversations, then you're better at that than to leave it that chance to, hey, let's talk about the plans or talk about something else that's totally irrelevant to what the reason why everyone's here at an event. So I think definitely don't leave things to chance. Carve the conversation, lead it.
Nice. So event professionals taking ownership of that conversation. I took sort of as a very condensed summary of that. Anybody else have some thoughts? How do we navigate these important conversations, and how important is it to be prepared both to have the conversation and then know what you're talking about when you go into the conversation with the event owners? Popcorn it. Don't make me do more goofy stuff here. Someone please tell me how you feel. Or we'll move on to the next question.
I think it's really important to be confident, and the key to confidence in the industry is to be knowledgeable, to really prep yourself, to do your background research on your client, on your venue provider, whoever it might be, because I'm on the venue side, and if I'm talking to a client and I'm not well versed, they're automatically not going to have confidence in my ability to execute their event. So the more research I can do, the more I can pull from previous examples, even if I don't know a ton about them, but I know, for example, it's a wedding. So what wedding clients have I worked with? How have I done something in their venue? The more I can come and present myself as an expert, even if I don't feel like an expert inside, the more that client will have faith in me and we can build a relationship together.
Love it. Competencies, capabilities, and confidence in them, I'm taking from that. And we got to be careful. Let's steer clear of imposter syndrome. Although I'm a big fan of the beautiful idiot. I like the idea of going into conversations and downplaying how much I actually know, because quite often as we try to justify our knowledge of the thing, we shut down feedback that we can get from that event owner, because they, oh no, you already know everything, I won't even mention that thing. So I think that's something we're exploring in our mastermind program at the end of the year, is trust. How do we build trust amongst our event owners, amongst our design teams, and then moving into our execution teams and our suppliers? And how do we navigate those conversations so that we build trust, so that we can go into conversations and not have to justify what we do, our process, and the steps that we take within it, but instead we can talk more about the things that are important to the event owners, which we generally find is not the process, it's not the steps we take or how diligent we are with those. Most of the time they trust us anyway, but it's more about how is what we're doing now, here in this time and place, serving their overarching aim that extends past the event. It's, go climbing the mountain towards the big, maybe 5-10 year goals that they have as a leader. And I'll use that to segue into the next round of popcorn questions that I'm going to put out to the group. And the question is, what are the most important conversations you need to have when designing your events with that event owner type, with that outcome focused individuals? Does anyone have any thoughts on what are the most important conversations you need to have when designing your events for the event owners?
I think like the most and foremost is to understand the intent of the event, right? Why are you hosting this? What is your objective? And from that objective, you're going to carve out an experience that will identify what is the gap, what's the challenge? And from that gap and challenge, you identify the solution, and the solution is their objective. I think once you have that experience roadmap designed and understanding their initial objective and the purpose, you will find and be able to meet that at the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Stephen Covey coined the phrase, start with the end in mind. So, what do you want the participants to do when they leave that meeting, whatever sort of format that meeting is in, and work back from there? If you want them to do this, and it could be different things for different stakeholders, of course, but build back from there and think, okay, well, if I want them to do this, what do I need to have them hear, see, feel, or do during the event to enable them to be able to do that?
I also try to get really clear on what the sort of primary drivers and the success metrics are for each of these stakeholders going in, and document it. So, and I also try to understand what their objections are, and not in a salesy way so that I can overcome them, but I do need to understand what their fears and objections are as well, so that I can get buy-in to the larger project. And then when I'm having revisit conversations, I have some documentation around how they had originally defined success for their group, because I find that sometimes changes. And I like to be real clear on here's how we established in the beginning that this would be successful. Here's our data. How are you feeling now? Have your goals changed in any way? And I like to open that conversation for them, because their goals may have changed through the experience, but the experience may have still met those original goals.
Interesting.
Around the metrics.
I like that. Mapping the stakes. Do we do enough mapping of what's at stake and understanding our stakeholders? Great point. I'm sorry, please. I cut someone off. Sharon, maybe?
Yeah, no, I was just going to come back to the metrics. I think we can challenge the metrics too that people propose. I know our CEO, he loves numbers, get me numbers, but that's not going to necessarily help if you don't have the right the right people, the people who are going to go away and do those things. It might just be passers-by that are just interested or observing. So I don't think we necessarily have to accept all of the metrics that people propose to us, and maybe dig in a little bit deeper to what are the real metrics, what is really going to create impact from your event.
I love that.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. And I think from a metrics perspective, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. In terms of how many events do you design? Do you do a series that's 10, or do you do 3 really awesome ones? Have the right people engage versus repetitive 10 times, same audience, same topic, same booths. And like, I'm sorry, you've lost me after the first one. So I think going through understanding the metrics, but also understanding the original objectives again to get the wow, pow, punch in from the first event or minimal events versus a massive too many, then it's impact. I think you have to focus on that too.
I'm going to throw this out to the group, and this is something we're very passionate about, because we've heard the word outcomes a few times, and it's been used in the correct context. But something we say in the Event Design Collective is events don't have outcomes. Events happen. They don't have outcomes. The stakeholders at the events have desired outcomes, and the events are mechanisms to achieve those outcomes that they have. So something we navigate in the book as well is understanding that outcomes are great and we can apply measurements, different forms of measurement metrics, although, as I said in the last session, death to surveys. We can apply all those things, but if we segue into another question now, how do we start conversations with our event owners, not only to get the time, team, and resources to design the event with more intention and purpose, but really help them navigate the difference between that event owner's wants and their true needs, their deep-seated needs? Because I think we touched on that when you said, hey, they want numbers driven, they want to know the analytics behind it. But perhaps those analytics won't necessarily serve the answers that they're looking for. How can you navigate as the leader of change and the leader of design, getting your executive to recognize that perhaps what they're talking about is a want and not what they actually need to create the change in their organization? Does that make sense?
I love the power why exercise. I love asking why to the first response, asking why again, unpacking, unpeeling. You have to get a little bit creative and be very subtle if you really want to do it well. But it sometimes takes more than one conversation for me to really understand what their why is, how I can best facilitate that, and returning to the point of what the real metrics to measure are. Because if we're truly looking to target a certain demographic, if we're looking to increase exposure, then that's very different than just sheer numbers. But that does take for me a lot of sort of gentle why to understand really, and also to understand what their previous experiences have been and how that might be influencing their answer.
Expectation versus satisfaction. It's an interesting. Do you have any specific techniques that you can share on see, I'll give you an example. I've, for my entire career, made a living by being an instigator and a shit disturber. I get thrown in boardrooms and I'm the one who, and I sit down in the room and go, hey, I'm the curious little monkey that's going to upset everything and ask you way more questions than should be asked about this topic, and you're going to get annoyed with me at the start of the meeting. I tell them that, and that for some reason gives me permission to do whatever I want, and ask as many questions and push the CEO in ways that they've never been pushed before. But that's a very abrasive thing that only a bald-headed, bearded, white Australian male can get away with. Do you have any examples you can share on how you've navigated the need to ask these deep questions and go deeper than a surface level why? And how can you do that in a nurturing way?
I also try to approach it leading with a little bit of personality first. I'm known for showing up, being very scrappy. I scribble notes madly as people are speaking. I take 20 pages of notes in a meeting, so people do understand that they're being heard, but I then will have discrete things they've said I can go back to. And some of it is a little bit of like I call it the farm girl shtick. Like I can get away with being a little bit scrappy, digging a little bit deeper because it's what I'm known for. And because I also lead with a lot of vulnerability, and I'm always the first one to be like, hey, that idea that I had last time was terrible. Let's rethink this. but really, somebody said earlier that, rather than surveys, just having good conversations. And I almost think of my own team as an exercise in defining personas. And so I have a lot of one-on-ones with my stakeholders to form that personal relationship, but to also just give them a space to talk to me. And again, it's just conversation. It's just giving that space and making the time for everyone to really feel heard.
Love it.
I think going off of that too, everything you said is dead on. But I think that it's very obvious when you're talking to stakeholders if you are listening for the intent of hearing or listening for the intent of responding. And when you lead with the first, it opens up the conversation. If you are truly invested in their process and you're asking the questions, like, what do you want the attendee to feel? Those types of things that you show that you're invested in their experience, that opens them up to really get that deeper level of conversation going.
I think just to throw in here as well, some of the conversations, especially when you're planning events, the need and the want goes down into a budget conversation, which is quite sensitive as well. It's like, let's list everything that's a must have. Let's understand what your objectives are, your intent, and then your wants. What does that actually mean? And what does that actually come out to be when you line list the cost? And a lot of them will say, okay, thank you for putting me back into reality. Not a comfortable conversation. I still want to do golf, but I'm okay to not do 9 or 18 holes or whatnot, or we can be more creative in other ways. But I think having that right conversation and being open and honest as well, once you build and establish that relationship.
Cena do sou teu fornecedor, mas eu vou estar contigo, pagas no almoço e tal. Não, é sempre uma passada. Sei, mas não.
Okay, there we muted. Sorry about that. Amazing. So I've heard some bravery there to sort of navigate and keep the conversation going, even though you're at that sort of sticky conversation point, is required. I can tell you firsthand, as I've been pushing people through this want versus need. So often, when we finally get to the need, we discover that the need generally achieves the want too. Because the want was surface level, but the deep-seated need was far more powerful. And in fact, it starts to hit the extra wants that they thought maybe out of reach, and they were just focused on that most immediate one. Cool. We just got to. So great. Shall we move on to another topic, perhaps in the book? I'm going to jump forward a bit further on because each of the chapters has a workbook that explores these kinds of questions. And we kind of touched on having the conversation. So now I want to grab something out of how to be successful at claiming time to design events. So I'm going to throw this to the group, and please popcorn in with what you think. What did you do previously whereby you were not being taken seriously when event owners were having conversations about the change your event can create? One more time. What did you do previously whereby you were not being taken seriously when event owners were having conversations about changes that you were going to create? So I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable in responding to this, and that's a safe space to do that. But Chloe, nice to see you.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. I'm a fan. Sorry, I'm just popping in during my lunch break, but I'm literally going through this right now. I'm a contractor with Microsoft, and so I'd never worked in a corporate environment before. And so learning those limitations and just how to speak within that space is an entire learning curve, along with learning event design and then implementing that. So I was, kind of trying to show like, hey, there's the way we can do this linearly that like gets at the root of what we're trying to get at. And no one was taking you seriously. So I basically kind of went through the methodology and had individual conversations where I didn't reference what I was doing. I was like, hey, like, tell me more about, this one stakeholder. And I just had like very organic conversation. And then what I did is I myself kind of put that into the analysis mode and visualized it in a PowerPoint. And then when I came back with like, oh, here's actually kind of like, I just wrote up a summary of what we talked about, but in this format, people like got it once they saw it. So it's still pretty new. Folks are still kind of maybe unfamiliar with the terminology, but I'm trying to basically use like the same language in my own presentations that can help us all get on the same page. But yeah, it's definitely been a challenge. So.
But that sort of learning by doing and that sharing by doing, you had to, like, you could talk about it forever and a day, but once they saw it and could experience it and that's an interesting way that you delivered it. And I'm really happy you experimented with that. But I think what I took from that was wasn't until they had something a bit more tangible that they could understand exactly what you were on about. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think events are so 3D in my opinion, especially in the design process. And like, I wish we were in a VR world where you could like point to every lines drawing from one another. So it's been the hardest thing to conceptualize in a 2D environment on a screen. Yeah. And I felt that, yeah, the kind of format I created was successful.
Sweet. Anybody else have any examples of where they were challenged to have conversations about getting that time to design and navigate that with the team, with their executives?
We have a catchphrase, and it's, we serve a community of women product managers. And so our catchphrase is always keep the women at the center. And for us, we're talking about the attendees, and we call it attendees when we're speaking with, say, sponsors, but we really try to keep the community at the center. And just that one line defines our common goal and sort of puts us all back on the same page. So I think it's really important, whether you're representing it graphically or whether you have a catchphrase, that there's something that is almost a cue to pull everyone back to center, to remind everyone that we're all on the same team. We all are essentially furthering the same central purpose. And for us, it's a catchphrase. I love the idea of representing that visually as well, but just something to recenter and remind everyone that, like, hey folks, we're all on the same team here. We all really want to create something that's uniquely valuable to this group of people and that respects their time and that changes everything from that moment forward for them.
Do you guys want some goodies? Do you want some gifts? Who would like a free copy of Design to Change? Elevating your abilities to look and act beyond the now. Not only is this a book that you're going to get, it also has an audiobook that you get for free, voiced by some weird Australian guy. And it has an augmented reality layer over the top. So we got additional videos that you can scan your phone over. And there's a website that's evergreen that's going to have more content to help support the kind of conversations that we're navigating. I'm going to throw a coupon code into the chat, and I would love all of you, because you participated in my session, to get a free copy of the book. So go to that bit.ly URL there, or navigate to our website. The coupon code is Liz sent me. All one word. So I think we're going to be wrapping things up shortly. I'd love to throw to the group, because we always, in the Event Design Collective, we are very passionate about testing our prototypes. Liz went out on a limb and put on a new kind of event here. How's this prototype event turning out for you as participants? Are you enjoying this roundtable conversation elements? 2 minutes.
I love it. It's more involved. I'm not just sitting and listening. I'm contributing and feeling like I'm heard. So I think it's a cool new format for engagement, especially.
Brilliant.
I firmly believe that the opportunity to participate on stage in a conversation is the only reason that I would show up for an event. It's the only reason it's more than a recording for me. A chat feed is not engagement. Chat feeds are not engagement. That does not count. And I love the ability to essentially become a part of the on-stage conversation as an attendee. It's what sold me on Digital Plus from the beginning.
You and I need to connect, because I feel like we're kindred souls in many respects.
I just reached out to you on LinkedIn. I've never met anyone else who describes himself as an experienced architect.
Yes. Fun. Any other thoughts from the team? And thank you for participating. So please make sure you jump online and grab a copy of that book as a thank you to us. There's a bunch of other information on the website. We're about to migrate to a new website. So check out the old one and see what that's like. And then you can see the evolution of the new design that comes out in a couple months.
I'm so sorry to report this, but I'm on the checkout page right now, and it's just showing free shipping, not the full. amount, which is, I'm always happy to give you money, but
Well, let me fix that for you. That's not right.
yeah.
Oh, look at that. Yes, it is wrong. You're right. Try again.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks for finding my bug.
That's literally like why we exist. Solve problems.
Still the same. Oh, now it works.
Ooh, bug fixed.
Thank you.
So I think that's probably our time. Are we getting kicked out now, boss? Okay, well, I'm going to send you all back to the main session because I think there's some good stuff coming up. But thank you for joining me. Please connect with me. Let's have more conversations. Great to see you all. All the best.
Thank you.